USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, November 14th, 2022. Each week we look back at the highlights of the weekend and the news of the week. This podcast is sponsored by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. We're going to start out with Penn State, even though we got a whole bunch of sweeps to talk about. And the reason for that, it's the second week in a row that Penn State has beaten the number one team. They got a split with Minnesota. They did it in consecutive weekends, beating number one. And now Minnesota drops to 5-4. So we've got a number of things to talk about. First of all, what does this tell us about Penn State? They're 10-2 overall. Maybe poo-pooed a little bit about their schedule, but it looks like they're pretty serious.
I guess it's follow on to what we said last week was they've started to prove themselves. Obviously, getting the win last weekend against a number one team that kind of opened people's eyes. Then you say, well, they got to do it twice in a row, and boy, did they ever! And they took it to Minnesota on the first night. Credit to the Gophers, they bounced back on night two and earned the split. But listen. Anybody that doesn't take Penn State seriously at this point is just risking. It's too high of a risk. This is a good team. This is a hockey team that, just like every other Guy Gadowski team, has tons of shots on goal. Our good friend Jess Myers, I think, was joking, hey, 25 seconds into the game, Penn State with 2 shots on goal. That's pretty typical. And that's what it becomes. They generate so much offense, whether it's quality chances, there's still chances, and you have to have goaltenders make the saves, control the rebounds. And we've seen too many teams that either can't do that, or they're giving up way too many grade A chances to this Penn State team because there's talent. There's a plenty of high-end talent on that team that nobody wanted to talk about before the season. They picked them near the bottom of the Big Ten preseason standings. I just think that this is a good team that you have to watch out for. This will be a team that will either win the Big Ten or they will get in that large bid. They will be in the NCAA tournament, barring some sort of a major setback, which would be, season-changing injury situations. I think this is a really good team that should be a top 3 team at the end of this week.
And we said it, you can only control your schedule. And granted, you make your schedule, but they're going out and they're finding ways to win. And then they go within the league and they're finding ways to win. And all the naysayers out there of where they were, and, was it a hard schedule? Was it not a hard schedule? They're proving it now. And for not having a hard schedule, they won all those games. And that's the most important thing, is to find wins. And Tim Dennehy came in and talked to all the leagues a couple of years ago at the coaches convention. And all they said was, it doesn't matter how many games you play. It matters how many wins you get. It doesn't matter how many road games, home games, it's wins. And, we talked as Atlantic Hockey about how do you get a second team? You win games. And they're giving themselves the opportunity with their schedule. They won them all. They didn't have a setback. And now they're following through back-to-back weeks, beating a number one team in the nation, which will have a high pairwise. Those teams will have high pairwises at the end.
Well, if you look at the strength of schedule column in the RPI, Penn State is number 16 after 2 tough weekends. But at number 7 in strength of schedule is Minnesota. They're now 5-4 in their last 9 games. Are they still the kind of a team that can be a number one team? Our decision desk tells us that Denver's going to be the number one team when the poll comes out after we're done recording. But what about Minnesota?
I have concerns. They're just not finding ways to win the games they're supposed to win. They've had a hard schedule. I get it. Will they probably go on a run this year? I bet they do. I bet they put together, a 6-game winning streak, and, that we'll look back on this 5-4 stretch and say, no, it was just, getting through some tough games. Maybe that's true. But they've got the Big Ten schedule ahead of them. And last I looked, there's not a lot of cupcakes right now in that Big Ten schedule. Notre Dame finds ways to win games. Obviously, we're going to get to Michigan State. Michigan State is playing really well. Michigan, we know how good they are. Wisconsin might be your only I'm going to use air quotes, cupcake. And I don't think that Wisconsin's a team you can take lightly any night, or they'll find ways to beat you. So I think that Minnesota is still good, and this is not something you need to panic if you're a Minnesota fan. But are they the number one team in the country? Forget about what the poll says. Are they the best team in the country? I don't think they are. By the end of the year, will they get there? Maybe.
Not an easy schedule now for the Gophers. Michigan, at Arizona State, and at Michigan State. I had a text from our radio color commentator, Mike Pursuta, who's a Michigan State alum and follows him. He said, the Big Ten standings seem to be upside down right now. And they are. If you look, Michigan State up top, and teams that are some of the we use the word blue bloods are at the bottom. And, we talk about Wisconsin being a cupcake, how they barely got through a weekend this weekend without dropping a game to Long Island. And there's got to be some panic in that city right now. You got Lindenwood coming in, and those are supposed to be 4 easy games. And that's a challenge right now for the Badgers right now.
Well, there were a whole lot of impressive sweeps this weekend. We talked earlier in the season how nobody would sweep. Quite a few teams did. And at the top of the list, really significant, is Denver. 3-2 and 6-3 sweeps. First win at the Ralph since 2018. First weekend sweep in over a decade for the Pioneers. Two things. It's got to make Pioneers fans thrilled to see them sweep a great rival like that. But boy, they are panicking a little bit in Grand Forks.
Well, I look at Denver right now, and the biggest thing that impresses me was that they really took it on the chin when they came out and played UMass. And since that time, they have one loss. It was against St. Cloud State, and it was in overtime. So they have pulled points out of every single game since that weekend sweep at the hands of UMass. They've had the ship, sailing the right course again. And obviously to go into the Ralph and take 2 against North Dakota, and the second one somewhat convincingly 6-3. I really think that this Denver team is starting to get their train going back. I think there was a little bit of growing pains when they had to play UMass, and there was a lot of emotion. I think you had the last 2 national champions playing one another, and UMass was pretty fired up for that series. Denver didn't have the punch back. They have had the punch back every night since then. Now, conversely, North Dakota, that is a team, and their fans. Oh boy, North Dakota fans are interesting, but they're not used to losing. And when you look at it, going back to October 14th, there have been exactly 2 wins for North Dakota since then. They got that great overtime win against Minnesota, and they beat Nebraska before tying them the next night and then losing in a shootout. So I think there's probably a reason to panic, but I also think that this North Dakota team it might just be more of a mediocre North Dakota team. They're good. I wouldn't want to play them in a 1-game series for a national championship because they know how to win. But I don't know that this is the same North Dakota team that we've seen in years past, that you knew every night that they could just kind of turn it on. And if they did, they were deadly. This team has a little bit more in terms of holes and flaws.
Is a 1-game series actually a series? Or is it just 1 game?
Thank you.
Yeah, just checking on that. But I find it, Denver just keeps proving the naysayers wrong and just quietly going about their business. I joked with everybody, we can't award them the national championship after winning the icebreaker. And then they go out and lose to UMass, but all they've done is win. And once again, I think it's because it's West, quietly win. And they're getting their recognition. And that's what I wouldn't say, do you sleep on the national champions, but are people sleeping on them? That's my question to you.
I think it's, you kind of said it. I'm not sure if people caught it as you were saying it, that there's something about Denver being out in Colorado. The games start, much later than an 8 o'clock or a 7 o'clock, East Coast game. So a lot of us are in bed before the games ever finish out in Denver. It's easy to forget about them. I don't think we should, as real college hockey pundits and fans and all that stuff. We shouldn't, but it's easy to forget that. Oh yeah, Denver. Oh, what did they do last night? Oh, they won again. Yeah, it's usually Saturday or Sunday morning when I'm going back to the USCHO homepage trying to figure out who beat who in the games that I might have missed on Friday or Saturday night. And that's usually when I'm finding out about Denver. So I think that somehow you shouldn't, but as East Coasters, Derek, I know you're Pittsburgh. It doesn't feel like the coast, but
time zone,
same time zone. We just lose track of a really damn good hockey team, which, by the way, strength of schedule, you mentioned strength of schedule, Ed. Denver has played the second toughest schedule in the country right now.
And they're having success. Well, that's looking good for the Pioneers. Let's stay with the Western leagues, so to speak. And I know that Penn State's not very far west in the Big Ten, but Michigan State, Derek, you mentioned that and the standings being upside down, but a big sweep over Ohio State, 4-2 or 4-2 and 4-3. They're now 8-3-1 overall. We all expected Michigan State to maybe have an uptick from last year. They've done renovations at Munn. They've got a new coaching staff. All those things point to it. Did anybody expect Michigan State to be this good?
No, I think that's the first statement. I don't think the coaches expected it. That's why they were picked towards the bottom. And they've played more games than everybody else right now. And that's what it comes down to. They're at, I believe it looks to be 7 conference games, and Penn State's played 7. Minnesota 6, Ohio State 6, Notre Dame. So they played a little bit more. That could be their lead per se of why they're in first place. But you got Michigan State, Penn State, Minnesota, and I still think a really good Ohio State and Notre Dame towards the bottom. And you got Michigan down there as well with only 6 points in 6 games. So I don't think anybody expected it. I will say they got a really good transfer goalie in Dylan St. Cyr, and goaltending can give you a lot of confidence and can hide a lot of problems within your hockey team. And Dylan St. Cyr has proven it in Notre Dame, proven it as a backup or a 1B at Quinnipiac last year, and now he's at Michigan State. And how weird is that to say somebody's been at 3 teams now in 5 years? But that's going to be the norm, and you're going to be able to go out and get somebody like that to help turn around your program, and that'll pay dividends because then they've got the goalie from the national development team coming in that changes commitment from Michigan to Michigan State. So there's a lot of positives going through Michigan State right now, but we'll see how it plays out at the end of the year. We got some teams that still have to catch them in some games.
I didn't know Adam Nightingale before he got to Michigan State, but a number of people said that when he was hired that he would have a chance to change this program. And one of those things where you just kind of, it's like, oh, well, every coach that goes in there, they say is going to change it. But you're right, Derek. I think that what they've done in terms of a program, the renovation at Mon, Ben Holden, who was out there calling one of the games, posted some stuff on social media over the weekend, and it looks just wonderful. And it's as somebody said this weekend, they said, oh, had that building fallen that far behind? The answer was way behind. And it's a great building, Mon, but it needed the facelift, and they did a great job, it sounds. And that will attract your recruits. That'll attract the student athletes that want to go to Michigan State. What Ron Mason and what Rick Comley built at that program was some great teams and some wonderful tradition. And that's a town that loves their hockey. Lansing can support hockey, and you saw it this weekend. Those buildings were packed, and the fans just going crazy. And I love seeing that. I love seeing a program that had some great prominence, maybe lost it for a little while, to get back and see how excited the fans can be. I mean, that I hope that that's something that happens, say, in Orono again, because that was one of those towns where I always enjoyed seeing the excitement of the fans. To see it in Lansing is fantastic.
Well, let's stick with one more Western team, and that's the prominent independent in Arizona State. They keep doing pretty much what they need to be doing. which is getting splits or so with bigger programs and sweeping the teams they should be expected to beat. 2 wins over Alaska Anchorage, 5-2 and 3-0. The Sun Devils are now 7-4-0. They don't have much room for error, and they didn't make one this past weekend.
Got to win those games. And we talk about it, just win what your schedule is. And they're going to have to put a lot of miles on their travel. I think they've got Minnesota coming up, which is going to be a challenge. But a lot of hype will be around that game with Logan Cooley being a Coyotes pick coming into Tempe. So there's going to be a little bit buzz. You know, they've got a lot of reasons for buzz. They're winning. They've got the new building. And then now they're going to have some teams that have to return to them because of what happened with when they went that whole year on the road with COVID. So they're going to have some challenges down the stretch. So just have to keep winning.
Yeah, I'm impressed. You know, that's 5 in a row for Arizona State. And Ed, you said it right. You got to win the games you're supposed to win. Now they've got some tough ones coming up. They're heading on the road to Clarkson. They'll, as Derek just mentioned, Minnesota will come in for 2. Then they go to Denver for 2. And then New Hampshire should be a team that they handle, but that's on the road. And that's going to be at the end of a lot of travel. You're going to have gone to Denver, probably back to Arizona for a couple of days, out to New Hampshire. That's so as you just said, Derek, they'll have a lot of mileage that they're going to have to go through here. But I think this next stretch, you know, I think maybe right to New Year's, because they have Boston College for the last 2 games before the 2022 calendar changes. So I think that right now, these next 10 games over a month and a half before New Year's, these could define their season. And
I don't think I've got trolled a little bit by somebody on our remain nameless. I think the one thing as we talk West, but we can't forget about the Central and the CCHA. You've got Michigan Tech that's doing a very good job within league. You got Bowling Green at the top of the charts. So we've got to make sure that obviously we can't forget about the West, but there's a couple really good teams that are coming out of the CCHA that will really be involved in the mix here. And if they go on a little bit of a roll, they could be the ones that if they don't win the playoffs would be a second team. And I don't know for sure right now if they've got enough non-conference wins to have 2 teams. That'll be determined, and they've got to get over that 500 mark. And I think they're in the 400s right now.
Right now, 419 winning percentage. That's not going to cut it to get a ton of teams in for the CCHA. And you know, Minnesota State is your only horse. You mentioned Michigan Tech. That's a 6-win Michigan Tech team. Not bad, but you know, if you're looking to get 2 bids, you know, an at-large and your conference champion, you're going to have somebody go on a run here. And, you know, Northern Michigan, 8 wins, but it's 8-6. You know, Minnesota State, 7 wins, 7-3. They're maybe the one that can carry the water for the conference yet again. But I'm not sure. The CCHA, they're kind of putting themselves into that same category as Atlantic Hockey and the ECAC in terms of success out of conference.
And I will say the reason I forgot Minnesota State is because they have played less conference games, and it's the same as a Michigan State. But you got Bowling Green at 4-4, and then they get some bonus points at 14 points. They will start catching those teams. And if they can go on a run, you know, Michigan Tech has done pretty good away from their conference. As well. They swept St. Lawrence a couple weeks ago. So I think if you start looking at teams to emerge out of there, it's going to have to happen pretty quickly here as we dive into conference play.
Well, we've got 5 teams in the East that picked up 6 points on the weekend, plus an interesting pair of games between UConn and Providence. And that's coming up next after the break. USCHO Weekend Review is sponsored by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. Visit dcu.org.
Sometimes it's not about wanting a new car, it's about needing one. And I needed one I could rely on. So I got an auto loan with DCU. They offer the same low rates on both new and used cars, and I was able to borrow a little extra to make a used car as good as new. My auto loan from DCU means a ride I can finally rely on, which feels like a pretty big thing. What will DCU mean to you? Insured by NCUA. Membership required. Visit dcu.org.
We're back with more of USCHO Weekend Review. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. Let's start out talking about Boston University. We've talked strength of schedule. BU is number one in that category. They had a huge weekend over UMass, and probably the biggest sweep of the weekend as we go through things, 7-4 and 5-1. I was pretty shocked by those numbers when I saw them.
Yeah, I called the Friday night game in that series, and what a you're out in Amherst and you have a great crowd, great atmosphere in the Mullins Center. And next thing you know, BU, before you could blink an eye, was up 5-0. And it happened quick. They got a 1-0 lead. Then Wilmer Skoog, the Scooger, as they say, pulls off another one of his lacrosse goals, his fourth that he's done since being at BU. And then, the building's kind of electric after that, even though UMass fans, I think, were a little shocked by it. And then quickly, 3 minutes, in the span of 3 minutes, the game goes from 2-0 to 5-0 because this is a BU team that can score quick and they can score in bunches and they attack. Jay Pandolfo really has them playing an upscale, high pace, fun to watch brand of hockey right now. Their biggest challenge, if they have one, and it's a big one, is staying disciplined. They take way too many penalties. They were better about that this weekend. That is something I know that Jay Pandolfo talked to his club about. But they averaged 15 minutes a game in penalties coming into this weekend, and that was after only taking 2 minors in their last game before this. So they're getting better, but if they stay out of the box, this is a dominant team, and they really did take it to UMass. They've now lost 5 games in a row, which is almost unheard of in the Greg Carvel era.
Not much more to add than that. You look from afar and you say I talked about it last week or 2 weeks ago about games that you should sweep, games that you should split, all that. You would have thought that would have been UMass would have had the favor to try to get the sweep, and for it to turn around, those are interesting points left on the table. And we talk about North Dakota getting worried. Is it panic time in there yet at UMass?
Tough to say. They're such a good team, but maybe. They have a lot of depth, but they've got to play better. They've got to get better goaltending.
Let's turn elsewhere in Hockey East. Merrimack keeps on rolling. Scott Borek's Warriors with a sweep of Maine, 1-0 and 5-3. Merrimack is now 8-3-0.
I gotta say that I should have seen this coming because they were one of the best teams down the stretch in Hockey East last season. But every year, it's almost what we were talking about with Michigan State. You take out your coach's ballot at the beginning of the year and you just pencil in Michigan State toward the bottom of the Big Ten. You pencil in Merrimack toward the bottom of Hockey East, and they shock us every year. Scott Borek has done a fantastic job coaching this team, getting more than you expect out of it. In that building that they play in, Lawler Rink, the Volpe Complex, whatever you want to call it, that is hell to go and play on the road. That is a very tough atmosphere. It reminds me of what Oceanside was for Arizona State. Just, small building, really close fan base, loud and tough rink to play in. And so I think that they have a built-in advantage for those home games. They showed it this weekend and took care of business against Maine twice.
Oh, you're giving way too much credit to Oceanside. I mean, Merrimack's rinks arena is a palace compared to Oceanside. So, I mean, I wouldn't put those two in the same breath. That's like comparing Bentley's new rink to the Jar when they played at John A. Ryan's skating rink. So don't even do that. But once again, another conference that standings are upside down. Yeah. You got Connecticut, Merrimack, Northeastern. And then at the bottom, you've got UMass, Maine, New Hampshire. I mean, UMass, 4 points. Where do you see that? And then you got the middle, and you do have, but at the end of the day, you've got the top 2 winning percentages or points percentage in the league in UMass Lowell and Merrimack, followed by Connecticut. So those are kind of changing things around, and then Providence follows, and then you start getting in the middle of the pack with the BUs. BUs are up there though. Then you get in the middle of the pack with Boston College, but there's some weird things. It shows the parity of college hockey right now, and that you can turn things around if you get the right culture, the right group of guys together, and then you just keep building on it. Instead of ever having to, graduate a big class, you reload and you get a couple grad transfers and you bring them into the culture, and then you bring some younger guys along. So this is an interesting. I'm trying to do something right now because you can't predict who's going to be in the grad transfer era. We're kind of doing a Moneyball project to kind of see what translates to each conference. And I really think that you're going to see a lot of people diving in to take one or two guys because they see the impact of change amongst teams quickly. And I think it's going to be harder and to get those grad transfers and people sitting out there. But then you've got some teams that, like Colorado College, who just did it all on freshmen. And so it'll be interesting to see when you pull these all together of are the conferences going to stay flipped? How long do they do it? How many grad transfers they bring in? How many transfers they bring in? And kind of see a good formula for trying to put things together. But hats off to all these teams. They're doing a great job of flipping the standings upside down.
Let's turn to the ECAC. Things are just kind of getting underway in league play. And since they have a travel partner system, it's not a sweep over one team, but Quinnipiac picked up wins over Brown and Yale. Harvard at 6-0 overall beat RPI in overtime and Union.
Yeah, well, that's the opposite of what Derek just talked about, the upside down. These are schools that you kind of expect to have these types of wins. And Quinnipiac and Harvard, they were picked to finish at the top of the league. They're both playing really good hockey right out of the gate. Harvard still perfect, 6-0. I think that what we see this is the one league in the country that it seems that there is nothing upside down. We are seeing the teams win games that are supposed to win games. We're seeing the teams get beat that are supposed to get beat. So that is maybe the one sense of normalcy we have in this entire country right now in college hockey is the ECAC.
I'm actually, what I'm kind of shocked at, I'm going to use the P word here, the pairwise at 6-0, Harvard 16th. Is this another scenario where they need to start winning some non-conference games within their league a little bit?
Too early. Yeah, it is, but it's also too early. Harvard's only played 6 games. You can't get an accurate pairwise measurement until they've gotten at least 10 games. What is 6 out of 6 of 27 is still not even a quarter of their schedule for Harvard right now, whereas a lot of teams have already played it there. I wasn't really talking about I know what you're saying.
Them. I was talking kind of the rest.
Yeah.
Quinnipiac's up there, but they're 7-1. But where's the next one in the pairwise list right now?
Well, here's the thing. You're absolutely right. It's the ECAC non-league schedule. Harvard, right now, where we stand today, after their 6 games, they have the number 57 strength of schedule, and Quinnipiac is at 32. For them to climb the pairwise, they have to have quite a high winning percentage. That's kind of the balance in the RPI between your winning percentage and the strength of schedule. So
right.
That is hurting them. But as Jim says, they got to get some more games in. They're going to have some non-league games. They're going to have the bean pot. And obviously BU is going to be pretty high in that. You expect Northeastern and BC to be somewhere in the mix. So Harvard will pick that up, but that's exactly right. When you start looking at the pairwise, especially when we get into the beginning of January, you're going to see it stratify among teams in different leagues based on the out-of-conference winning percentage.
And the next 2 on the list, and once again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but Union, unless I'm missing something, Union tied for 32nd, and then you've got RPI at 39, tied with St. Lawrence, and then Clarkson after that. When have you ever seen Clarkson that far down in the pairwise? Cornell, 46th. And once again, they will figure out their schedule and do a better job of getting up there. But I think that right now they're just kind of all muddying along a little bit. You need those 2 teams to win a lot of games. And
the Ivies are a big hope now for the ECAC. They haven't played many non-conference games. Harvard hasn't played a single one yet, so they'll have 7 non-conference games they will play at some point this season. Those Ivies you're almost depending on, because the reality is that the rest of the ECAC has played most of its non-conference schedule. You've played more than 67% of your non-conference schedule already if you're a team that's not an Ivy. So the Ivies are now the hope. So you're talking about schools like Cornell, Harvard, Dartmouth. Maybe those are the three Ivies that you can point to. The others, Brown, Princeton, Yale. I'm not sure what you get out of those schools. So you've got to find a way to get some non-conference wins out of the Ivies because they're the only ones really that have the big chance to have impact in the ECAC going forward.
Turning to Atlantic hockey, RIT was picked fourth in the coaches poll and in consecutive weekends beat the two teams picked ahead of them at 1 and 2 in AIC on the road last weekend in a home sweep of Sacred Heart in a top 2 matchup. The Tigers now 6 points ahead of Sacred Heart and have kind of stratified themselves above the rest of the league. I see RIT almost all the time. And I can tell you that the things that are contributing to that right now is scoring from the defenseman. The top scorer on the team, Jojo Casero, has 7 goals, 7 assists for 14 points, 4 power play goals. And number 2 is his defensive mate, Aiden Hansen-Bukata, the team's 3rd on the power play nationally and 7th in the PK. And they're getting some good goaltending. There are a lot of good things happening for the Tigers.
Yeah, we talk, Derek, about wanting to have that special teams combined percentage around 110. RIT right now very close to 120 with a 31% power play and 88.2% penalty kill. That's pretty impressive. That special teams is really getting it done for RIT, but I think they're also playing complete games, and they're proving, at least within their own conference, that they are the team to beat now. And you're, as you say, sometimes maybe they've played more games than other teams in their conference. I haven't even really looked at the standings, but they're winning them. And now they're taking the lead and they're getting that advantage. And if you have games in hand, you're chasing. And chasing is the hardest way to do it. There's nothing more difficult to do in sports than to try to chase the teams above you in the standings. So I think hats off to what RIT has been able to do thus far this season. And Wayne Wilson seems to have his team playing really good brand of hockey right now.
Yeah, they've always find a way to make a little bit of after a downward spiral for a little bit. And it's not downward to where they're at the bottom of the conference, but they haven't won the conference in a little bit. And this looks to be that team. And you see them on a daily basis, Ed, so you could probably speak to it more than anybody. But this might be a more complete because I don't think they have the top heavy forwards that they always had previously. You don't have a Garbowski and you don't have some of the guys that when they were winning back to back to back that were the high end forwards. And you're being led by a defenseman, and those are good things, and you're getting good goaltending. And you need a goalie, and you need to be able to do that. And to go in and AIC's on a little bit of a skid right now. We haven't seen them go that way, but to do it to AIC and to Sacred Heart in back-to-back weekends. And we use it to be the best, you got to beat the best. Well, they're beating the best right now.
Let's move on to one other series over the weekend, UConn and Providence. UConn didn't lose. They picked up the shootouts in both games, 2 ties versus Providence, a 1-1 tie, and the other end of the spectrum, a 6-6 tie. UConn had to rally from 3-0 down and down 6-4 late to tie. So Connecticut now 9-1-3 on the season.
And I've been kind of touting them since the beginning. They were my dark horse at the beginning of the season. They're not that dark anymore. They're really becoming a front runner in Hockey East, and they're playing good hockey and finding ways to win. And I like to comment that Mike Cavanaugh had after Friday's game. He said it was in the middle of the second period. It was a 0-0 game against Providence. And he said, I found myself on the bench being more of a fan than a coach. I was enjoying watching those two teams get up and down the ice. And that's, you're enjoying a 0-0 game. The next night, you really enjoyed it. 12 goals and the way that they kept bouncing back. And they had that building, the XL Center, that's a tough building to generate a lot of atmosphere in. It's a, 12, 13, 14,000 seat arena. They curtain it off for UConn games, so it doesn't feel that big. But it's still a big building. So if you don't have a crowd that's large and into it, it can feel dead in there. And it does not right now. Those fans were into the game on Saturday, loud as anything. The shootout, when they actually won in the shootout on Saturday, I think it went 6, maybe 7 rounds. The place went nuts, and I'm sure that this is one of those weekends that as a coach, you just got 2 ties, but I guarantee you it felt to those players and that coaching staff like they got 2 wins.
They're going to have a big problem in their hands if they keep winning. And that is moving into the new building. They're not going to have enough seats.
Right.
They went off of, kind of the previous years of their attendance and figured out what they do. But now they're on this big roll. They're not going to have the seats that they need to be able to continue doing this. But they've got it. They've got it going. They've got it going the right way. They've got a lot of momentum within that program. It's we keep talking about last year and where they were just on that bubble, and now they've got the new building and they've got the top end of the Hockey East. And I think that this is a team, and you can't say you've jumped on this bandwagon, Jimmy. You've been on the bandwagon all year long. You're on the ice bus, that's for sure.
And the ice bus does some good traveling. And, he's not up there in national scoring leaders, but Ryan Twerberg is a fantastic player for them. Keep his name in the back of your head. He will be a player, 13 points in 13 games, 9 goals. He's somebody that you have to put in the back of your mind. If he continues on a great pace, he'll get into that Hobie conversation. He deserves it.
Boy, we're going Hobie conversation now, pairwise. We're off the rails.
All those things we're not supposed to talk about.
Yeah, we've already skipped ahead to mid-January. One last thing to talk about that's come up week after week is protocol penalties and protocol emphasis. A couple of games had some weird ones. UMass-BU, a crazy one. Also, Sacred Heart at RIT. I know Derek's got some comments on it, but Jim, you saw how the one happened at UMass. Maybe you can describe that before we get Derek's input on that.
Yeah, so UMass was down 5-1 after 2. I had mentioned it earlier. They went down 5-0 to BU. They scored a late power play goal to make it 5-1. It's still a long ways to think about a comeback, but with about 3 or 4 seconds left in the period, one of the BU players slew-footed a UMass player, and nothing was called on the ice. Greg Carville used his challenge to have the referees look at it before they went to the locker room. They looked at the play, determined it was a major penalty. So UMass going to start the third period, giving themselves a chance, a 5-minute power play, the best power play in the country. And what happens? The UMass coaching staff did not get back to the bench. They were still walking on the ice after the 0-0-0 was on the clock, and the referees assessed them a minor penalty for protocol violation, which negated 2 minutes of that 5-minute major power play. They actually still scored a power play goal after the 2 minutes were up, but it just felt like you did something so heroic in making a great challenge, get the major, and then the protocol penalty negates a part of that power play. It felt strange. It felt odd. But all of these protocol violations that we have seen in college hockey this year all have felt odd.
And I would I'm going to make some phone calls because we keeps popping up on our show, and I keep going, they've got to relax. These are things that, maybe the Zamboni was in their way. Maybe something happened. They can't just keep giving the penalties to these teams for silly little things. And do we talk about, it's in the rules about being off the ice at a certain time? Yes, it's in the rules. But they also have to figure out that these are some game-changing things that they're doing. And I want to know from the coach's perspective out there, because I've obviously haven't been, are these being talked about at the levels of the referees? Are they telling them every little thing to where you don't do things wrong? I mean, what if you're walking around the outside of the rink and you're not on the bench when you start? Is it because the coaches aren't on the bench because they're a minute late or a couple? I mean, where does this all roll into? And it seems like we're getting a little ticky-tack with these protocol violations. I don't know. I'm all about keeping the rules the right way. If you're going to call one, you call the other. But I think the people in the building are the ones that are starting to suffer, because they have no idea what some of these penalty calls are when you just announce a protocol violation, or skating to your net to congratulate your goalie when you have to skate across the ice anyway, and different things like that. I mean, These are kids, and sometimes they're not NHL, but the NHL doesn't even do it. You watch NHL come on at different times. I don't think there's that much strict or rigid standards in the NHL either. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll tell you from what I can see, and I've started watching this now on games that I'm broadcasting during warmups. I've watched most teams now place an assistant coach on the bench for the last minute of warmups from that 24 to 23. And they make sure that every one of their players are off the ice at 23 because no team seems to want to start the game with a minor penalty. I was watching straight across the Boston University bench on Friday night, and one of the assistants standing there, and he was making sure that if guys were taking too long, he was yelling, and everybody was off the ice, at about 23:07, 23:06, and the referees and the linesmen are standing there watching. So I get it. I don't know why it's such a big point of emphasis. It's something that I need to probably make some calls in the officiating world as to why this is being really hammered home and why it's being so strictly emphasized and enforced. It does seem a little ticky-tack, as you said, Derek, and I'm always one that supports officiating and the officials. They've always been good to USCHO, and all of our broadcasts have been very open with us. It's something we probably should reach out and get better clarification of why it's so important to the rules and why it feels such a need to enforce it.
Was there an issue? Did we see games going an extra couple minutes because somebody stayed out too long? I mean, you're on the clock anyway. You go out at 7:50 or 6:50. You know that, and there's always plenty of time. If you go out at 7 minutes and you're 23 off there, you're usually about 16 minutes to do the ice. Most places have 2 Zambonis. I mean, I don't see the problem with it. I mean, Ed, you saw one this weekend too, right?
Right. And it was a case of what you described with the players skating over to their goaltender instead of going right off the ice through the bench door. So, that to me is ticky-tack. It makes you wonder why that rule is even there. Is there something they're worried about?
That one I actually have heard about and understand that they really don't want players going on the ice unnecessarily because of the fact that you could get opposing teams crossing, potentially something said. Next thing you have a brawl.
These are guys who were already on the ice, though. Yeah. It was just the 5 skaters who went a little out of the way towards the goalie as they all came off the ice. It was real ticky-tack, I think.
But you're saying potentially that this is a problem because you go to your goalie and then there's a brawl. Name how many times that's happened.
I know, but even if it's one, that I think is what they want to avoid. I don't agree. I'm not gonna. I mean,
so we're gonna have homework this week.
Yep.
We're gonna have homework. Jimmy, you got to talk to refs. Ed, you got to talk to other broadcasters and people that have seen this. And I'm going to talk to some coaches, and we're going to report back here to the listeners because this is out of control, in my opinion. And I'm one, if it's in the rule book, you call it. But I mean, 5 guys skating to their goalie to tap them on, maybe he made a massive save at the end of the period and you're there, but nobody else comes on the ice. Give me a break.
I agree. Well, let's wrap it there. USCHO Weekend Review is sponsored by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. Visit dcu.org. Find our podcast at uscho.com/podcast or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. For Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Weekend Review.